History is written by the victors. But sometimes victory is not enough. Sometimes the goal is erasure. This is the story of a kingdom that did not simply fall. It was hunted, erased, and nearly forgotten. A civilization that once stood at the crossroads of the world and vanished so completely that history itself went silent. Before their name became a whisper, they were a power. For nearly 200 years, from 1038 to 1227, the Western Xia dynasty ruled a vast and strategic empire, known to its people as the Great Xia and to others as the Tangut state. They were not a minor kingdom. They were not a border footnote. They controlled the Hushi Corridor, a 1,000-kilometer lifeline of the Silk Road, the only true gateway between Central Asia and northern China. Whoever held this corridor controlled trade: silk, horses, salt, silver, ideas, faith, and power. Empires rose and fell over this land, and the Tanguts held it for generations. At its height, Western Xia spanned over 800,000 square kilometers, stretching across what is now north-central China. Anchored by fortified cities, deserts, and mountain passes, with its capital at Yinchuan, a city of walls, canals, temples, and markets. But the Tanguts were more than gatekeepers. They were builders. They forged a culture unlike any other, a fusion of Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese administration, and nomadic steppe traditions. Their cities shimmered with murals, pagodas, and stonework. Contemporary observers described their kingdom as shining and sparkling. Their most daring achievement was not military, it was intellectual. Around 1036, the Tanguts created their own writing system. Not borrowed, not adapted, invented from nothing. A script of thousands of complex characters designed to capture the sound of their language precisely. It was an act of defiance, a declaration of identity in a world dominated by Chinese cultural gravity. They used this script to translate Buddhist scriptures, to write laws, poetry, histories, to preserve their worldview in ink and stone. The Tangut state was a paradox. Its rulers resisted assimilation, mandating traditional hairstyles and clothing, preserving Tangut customs at court. Yet they mastered the bureaucratic systems of their neighbors, adopted Chinese governance, studied foreign warfare, and built one of the most sophisticated armies of its age. Their military blended heavy cavalry, archers, infantry, chariots, and early gunpowder weapons. Iron bombards, sometimes carried on camels for mobility, a rare fusion of nomadic speed and settled firepower. They were Buddhists, but their faith was layered with shamanistic traditions, ritual, and scripture existing side by side. They were warriors, but also diplomats, balancing relationships with the Liao, Song, and Jin dynasties, surviving through negotiation, tribute, and calculated resistance. For nearly 2 centuries, Western Xia did not merely endure, it thrived. Rich, proud, confident in its place between worlds. And that was its curse. Because beyond the northern steppe, a force was gathering, one that did not seek balance, only submission. His name was Temujin, the man history would call Genghis Khan, a political and military genius who united the fractured Mongol tribes into a single disciplined war machine. By 1206, he was proclaimed ruler of all Mongols, and the steppe had never known unity like this. His ambition turned outward, toward the wealthy Jin dynasty in northern China. But before striking the Jin, he needed security, resources, revenue. And directly in his path stood Western Xia. They were not the final prize, they were the door. The first Mongol raids began in 1205, fast, brutal tests of Tangut defenses. In 1209, the storm truly arrived. This was Genghis Khan's first major campaign against a fortified state, and it would change Mongol warfare forever. The Mongol armies swept south, overrunning border garrisons with speed and terror. But the Tanguts fought back. They fielded massive armies, some estimates reaching 150,000 experienced warriors defending fortified cities. The campaign culminated at Yinchuan, the capital protected by towering walls and deep canals. Here, Mongol mobility failed. So Genghis adapted. He ordered the Yellow River diverted to flood the city into submission. For months, his men built a massive dike. And then it collapsed. The flood destroyed the Mongol camp instead, forcing retreat, a rare humiliation. Yet the damage was enough. In 1210, the Tangut emperor sued for peace. The terms were brutal: a royal marriage, enormous tribute, and vassalage to the Mongol Empire. Western Xia survived, but it knelt. For the next decade, they existed under Mongol shadow, providing troops and supplies, watching resentment grow within their court. They endured, but they did not forget. And neither did Genghis Khan. This uneasy peace would not last. What followed would not be conquest, it would be vengeance and extinction. For 15 years, the Western Xia lived on borrowed time. They paid tribute. They sent soldiers. They watched the Mongol war machine sharpen itself against other empires. And then they made a choice. In 1219, Genghis Khan prepared for his greatest campaign, yet the invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia. As was his right, he summoned troops from his vassal Western Xia. This time the Tangut court refused. Led by a general remembered as Asha, they sent a message that stunned the steppe. They told the great Khan that if he lacked the strength to fight without them, then he had no right to rule at all. It was not just rebellion. It was insult. And to Genghis Khan, loyalty was sacred. He did not turn back. The Western campaign could not wait. But he swore an oath. A debt would be collected, with interest. For years, as Mongol armies obliterated cities across Central Asia, Western Xia waited, attempting alliances with the Jin and Song, hoping for a united front. They hoped the storm would pass. It did not. In 1225, Genghis Khan returned. Older, hardened, consumed by a single purpose. This would not be subjugation. This would be extermination. He gathered an army of nearly 180,000 veterans of conquest, now armed with something new. This was not the Mongol force that failed at Yinchuan years before. They now possessed siege engineers, Chinese and Persian specialists, counterweight trebuchets, catapults, advanced gunpowder bombs. The Mongols had learned how to break cities. What followed was not war, it was systematic erasure. In 1226, the campaign began at Karakoto, a fortress city of the Tanguts. It fell. Then another, and another. Cities were surrounded, starved, assaulted, destroyed. Surrender no longer guaranteed mercy. This was punishment. A scorched earth doctrine executed with precision. The Tanguts made one final desperate gamble. Late in 1226, they gathered what remained of their strength. Some sources claim hundreds of thousands, almost certainly exaggerated, but massive nonetheless. They met the Mongols near the frozen Yellow River. It was their last stand. The Mongols' feigned retreat drew the Tangut forces forward, then closed the trap. Encirclement, missile fire, relentless pressure. The Tangut army was annihilated. With their field forces destroyed, nothing stood between the Mongols and Yinchuan. In early 1227, the final siege began. The city held for months. Then something unprecedented occurred. During the siege, Genghis Khan died. The cause remains uncertain. Illness, a fall, a wound. History does not agree. But his death did not save the city. It sealed its fate. His final orders were absolute. His death was to remain secret. The campaign must be completed. And when Yinchuan fell, no one was to be spared. In September 1227, the Tangut emperor surrendered, unaware the great Khan was already dead. He was executed immediately along with the imperial family. Then the Mongol army descended upon the city. Yinchuan was looted, burned, its population slaughtered. Imperial tombs were desecrated, libraries destroyed, temples leveled. The Western Xia ceased to exist. Not conquered, deleted. So complete was the destruction that later Chinese histories barely acknowledged them, reducing an empire to annexes and footnotes. Their script became unreadable. Their cities vanished beneath sand. Their people scattered or absorbed. For centuries they were a ghost. Some scholars argue this was one of history's first attempted genocides, others call it ethnocide, but all agree on one thing. The goal was not control, it was erasure. And for nearly 600 years it worked. Until the desert gave something back. In 1908, at the ruins of Karakoto, a buried library was uncovered, thousands of scrolls preserved by sand and silence. Among them a Tangut Chinese glossary, the key to a lost language. The Tanguts began to speak again. Their laws, their poetry, their faith. Archaeologists uncovered cities, imperial tombs near the Helan Mountains, now recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A civilization resurrected piece by piece. The Western Xia were not weak nor forgotten by accident. They were erased deliberately, and history almost allowed it. Their story is a warning. That memory is fragile. That silence can be manufactured. And that entire worlds can disappear unless someone listens for their voice.